Well, the UN Human Rights Council has voted overwhelmingly to investigate possible atrocities committed by Russian soldiers in the area around Kyiv. Those alleged crimes include the killing of unarmed civilians, torture, and rape. For more, I'm joined by France 24's chief foreign editor, Robert Parsons. Hello to you, Rob. Tell us a little bit more about what came out of the council's session.
Well, as you said, overwhelming support in favour of setting up a body to investigate these allegations of war crimes, which have been mounting steadily in volume since the beginning of the war. It voted 33 for, 2 against, with 12 abstentions. The 2 against were China and Eritrea. Interesting that China voted against this time, because hitherto it's been sitting on the fence and it's not voting really either way. But this time they decided to go with the Russians. But regardless, 33-2, it's an overwhelming vote in favour. Michel Bachelet, who's the head of the council, has made 2 visits to Ukraine in recent weeks. The most recent, just coming back, I think a week or so ago, visited 14 villages and towns in the area north of Kyiv, and said she was horrified by what she saw. While she was there, I think it was 1,000 civilians had been found dead, of which somewhere in the region of 300 had been deliberately killed by Russian soldiers, apparently, sometimes by snipers, sometimes execution. Some showed signs of torture as well. And she said that the council team there had come up with at least 12 people, women who had been raped. And that, she was suggesting, is just the tip of the iceberg. The problem with a lot of rape victims in Ukraine, as elsewhere, is they're very reluctant to come forward and talk about it. When I was in Ukraine myself a couple of weeks ago, I was trying to do a story on this, and the chief of police that I spoke to for Kiev region said the women just do not want to talk about it. He said he knew of many, many cases where there had been rapes, but the women just wanted to put it out of their minds for understandable reasons. So I mean that is where the council is going at the moment, setting that body up, trying to go against the odds and get convictions against individual Russian soldiers. Very, very difficult to do, though.
Yeah, and in addition to these international inquiries, Ukraine conducting its own investigations. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, Irina Venediktova, is the general prosecutor for Ukraine, has said just recently that they have now got 10,700 criminal cases lined up against Russian soldiers for violations of one kind and another since the start of this war on February the 24th. But again, the same problem. You know, it's all very well compiling the evidence, but how do you gain justice? In some cases, as we're seeing at the moment in Ukraine, they're bringing charges against POWs and cases are just about to start in the Ukrainian courts against one man in particular who was escaping from the fighting. He was spotted by an elderly Ukrainian man on his bicycle. To make sure that Ukrainian man didn't report his presence, he apparently shot him. He stands to be sent to prison for 15 years if found guilty. But by and large, you know, it's the same thing with the UNHRC. You know, compiling the evidence is one thing, getting justice is another. I mean, you can imagine the Ukrainian courts finding plenty of evidence against an individual Russian soldier, being able to identify him through one means or another, the military intelligence or even social media. Or for instance, through CCTV, as we saw in that case that was highlighted in the international media on Thursday, where you can see Russian soldiers clearly, with their faces identified, shooting at an unarmed civilian Ukrainian. The problem is, how do you then get justice? I mean, presumably the soldiers will have either left Ukraine or be serving somewhere else with the Russian army, gone back to Russia perhaps. The Russians aren't going to hand them over. So that is really the sort of difficulty they and other groups, NGOs in Ukraine, one, for instance, called Truth Hounds, is doing pretty much the same work as the Justice Ministry, but on a private basis. These are people who have been trained too by prosecutors from the International Criminal Court to go after evidence that can be used in court, but they all face the same problem ultimately of how do you actually ensure that justice gets done, when the Russians for sure are going to protect individual soldiers even if they're found guilty in the Ukrainian courts.
All right, Rob, thank you very much. Rob Parsons, France 24.